Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever this may find you. My name is Juliana Nambiru, and I am a Ugandan citizen who likes to comment on what goes on in our country and basically talk about what actually this regime is doing to our people. The reason I'm making this video today is because it's the day after the by-election in Hoima. And as expected, the election did not or has not respected the will of the people. And as I go on, I'll explain why I came to that conclusion and why, what is the purpose of me making this video. Hoima is found in the western part of Uganda in the Bunyoro sub-region, and basically takes up is part of what they call the oil-rich Albertine region. Therefore, this area or this region is of strategic importance to this regime to ensure, because that's where the oil is. And as everybody knows, the last few years they've been sort of stealing or secretly extracting oil and selling it on the black market through Kenya. So obviously, maintaining control of that region is of strategic importance. Therefore, they would not have allowed it to go to opposition hands. And that is why you saw literally warfare or military hardware that should only be seen in times of war on the streets of Hoima the last 2 weeks. You saw deployment of special forces from Museveni's son's, Muhoozi Kainerugab's team, or I don't know what you call them, the SFC, the special guards or the red tops. They kind of were everywhere. And all of these were intimidation tactics to ensure that the region remains in the hand of the ruling regime. Because, as I said, it's of strategic importance because of its mineral wealth or its oil wealth. So despite that, despite the region being very wealthy, the ordinary person in Hoima, or the ordinary citizen, has not at all seen the benefits that have come from the oil. They've sort of been bystanders or spectators as the wealth is sort of shipped out of the region, and there's been no economic sort of return. There've been no returns on their natural resources, on their God-given natural resources. Therefore, it was of strategic importance for this regime to make sure that they win. The other reason why they absolutely needed to win in Hoima was because of the huge turnout and unprecedented unity amongst the opposition parties, mainly the People Power Party and I think DP. And whilst the candidate was officially FDC, there was a huge turnout, and it would have been, it was a huge turnout of the People Power movement, and it would have been a terrible sort of slap in the face for Museveni if People Power had won. So they did everything within their power to ensure that doesn't happen. Part of what I said, what they did, includes the intimidation of voters by bringing out war, by turning the streets of Hoima into sort of almost like a war zone, having tanks and guns and men. The police is already partisan, but you had men dressed up in sort of riot gear and very scary stuff for an ordinary non-military individual or ordinary peasant. So those were the part of the intimidation tactics to ensure that they remain in control of that region or that district. The other thing they did was obviously use like I said, to use the fact that they're in government to their own advantage, and that included making sure that Umeme is the electricity provider, the main electricity provider, made sure that all lights were turned off at strategic times and moments. Again, part of the intimidation tactics of the NRM and this government. They ensured that, you know, that pre-ticked. We've seen all these before, but pre-ticked ballots were sort of stuffed or were put about in different parts of, you know, at different polling stations. And there's plenty of video evidence to show that this has been done. It is appalling. It is appalling use of of power, abuse of power. They used, you know, the state-owned means of coercion, or like the army tanks, the partisan police, Umeme. I saw a video of an RDC, I think, beating up a woman with a stick. That sort of intolerance, okay, that sort of intolerance to any form of opposition, is not conducive to holding a free and fair election. So anyone who is gloating that the NRM won is burying their head in the sand by pretending that they did not see people get beat up. They did not see the intimidation, that Umeme did not turn, did not turn off the power, that people power activists were not arrested. All these things happened. People were beaten up very, very badly. Simply, this is all before the actual election day. So, whilst the rallies were very well attended, and you can see that people were enthused and sort of, the Nyakato, who was the opposition, the united opposition representative or candidate, you could see the overwhelming support that she was getting through the numbers at rallies. And whilst that cannot be the only litmus test of, you know, what voter turnout will be, the people of Hoima made it very clear that they were not particularly interested in the NRM, because the NRM literally had to bus little school children, underage, not even voting age children to attend their rallies. So, and yet you had, you know, rallies packed for the opposition members, when they came into town. So you saw that Nyakato had the will of the people and the support of the people. However, again, when it comes to election days, they do what they do best. We've seen this before. We saw it in the previous election. They stuff, election boxes arrive late, or election material arrives late in the city centre. Pre-ticked boxes are found, intimidation, violence, election violence, but really sort of, and this time it's been caught on camera, so it's no longer a case of, the opposition's crying crocodile tears because they failed to win. So we know the tactics. And the first thing that I thought of when I got up this morning was that the way that it has been done so blatantly, with complete disregard of the will of the people of Hoima, leaves Ugandans with absolutely no option but to factor in and to get it into their heads that Museveni will not leave. There will be no peaceful transition under Museveni. There will... The idea that Museveni can be removed via the ballot box is a sort of is a futility. Museveni came by the gun. The way that he, the grip and the way that he's currently running Uganda, he's making it almost impossible for any other form of transition to happen unless the people of Uganda revolt, stand up and say enough is enough. We have had enough. Now, the natural reaction when you see bullies is that you're intimidated, you're fearful, and you sort of recoil into sort of your shell, and you say, you know what, doesn't matter what we do, they win anyway. I think what Hoima should do is galvanize people. It should energize people. It should be a rallying call to Ugandans to wake up and to realize that it's going to take us Ugandans to fight for this, and by any means possible. It's no longer, it's of no use continuing to play this electoral game that Museveni, where Museveni, you know, puts on the pretends to be democratic and puts on a charade for foreign powers to say, oh, look, every 5 years we have elections and blah, blah, blah. And all they really have to do is to get the voters out. Well, actually, if you're holding guns to people's heads and through intimidation and putting tanks on their streets, do not be surprised that people are sort of running away and shying away. People want to protect their lives. And you have made it clear that you will kill and you will stop at nothing to ensure that you stay in power. You know, you didn't just stop at changing the constitution. You imprison people for talking. People who you will throw mothers in prisons for daring to speak up to you and to speak truth to you. And by that I mean people like Stella Nyanzi. You continue to terrorize her, to persecute her, and to sort of brutalize her. And when people, these are all bully intimidation tactics. And when people see that, they sort of, the natural tendency is to say, let me get back into my little corner. What I think Hoima has done is made it very clear that all options are on the table. If this man, through, you know, was able to go back to the bush, or was able to go to the bush and to fight a system that he felt was unfair, Ugandans are being left with absolutely no choice but to start considering a plan B, to start considering other means of getting rid of this man, because respecting the rule of law and going to the ballot box is not going to remove him. And it hasn't. He has been a thug and acted like a complete bully, using his son's forces to ensure that he stays in power. And I presume the plan is that once he's out of power, then his son will take over and then employ the rest of his, you know, the rest of his kin to rule Ugandans. In the meantime, your children go to substandard schools, schools that are sort of dilapidated, falling apart. Some even learn under trees. The hospitals, they build these buildings, but there's no staff, there's no equipment, there's no medicine, and you know, within a year or two of this sort of brand spanking new building, it's falling apart because literally it cannot and has not been able to function as a hospital would, because it's not, you know, a hospital is not just a building. It's members of staff, it's expertise, it's all sorts of you know, it's like I said, it's not just a building. It takes a lot more to run it. It's a hospital. It needs a budget. It needs planning, etc., etc. So whilst your children are dying, your mothers are dying in their hospitals, theirs are being flown to Germany, to Europe, to the UK to give birth to children. If they have any sort of ailment, they are taken care of. Their children go to school, to schools and universities abroad, whilst yours stay in these substandard schools. You know, this is the drum we've been beating as members of the opposition for a long time. And it's time that Ugandans woke up to the reality, to what's actually happening. You know, well, everything, Uganda now is between those who support the government and those who don't. Some are coerced because of you know, because of the way the system, what they call the mafia system, has actually evolved, that people dare not speak up because then they'll lose their livelihoods, they lose their contracts, they'll lose, you know, it's a self-interested thing. But there comes a point that Ugandans have to realize that, that whilst you might be safe, or you think you're safe under the regime, it's a mirage. You're not at all safe. You will have an accident on the bad roads. Once you have an accident, for example, you'll be taken to a substandard hospital where there will be no specialist, there will be no scanners, there'll be no electricity, there'll be no running water. You could die from a preventable disease. So if you continue to think you're okay, stop lying to yourself. When it comes to security, Museveni has failed Ugandans in the only thing he said, or he used to have a mantra where the Bagandas say that Twebelelemu tulo, abantu tebakal tulo, because literally the insecurity is such that people are being attacked and hacked to death at their gates. You know, the middle classes live behind high walls and whatever, but even getting in, you will be attacked. So you're no longer safe. So he can no longer guarantee safety of person or property. The institutions have broken down. Basically, Uganda is in such a state that I'm convinced that anybody who continues to support this regime, given the reality on the ground and the circumstances, if anybody continues to support this regime, either you're totally insane, or you are suffering from an incredible amount of cognitive dissonance, because it's before you. You see the state of the roads, you see starving children, you see the breakdown of institutions, you see the stealing of land, you see people being shot. A whole minister shoots a young man in cold blood and is protected, is not persecuted. There is no justice for the poor. There will be, if you think that you will get justice because somehow you may come from the right tribe or the right region or whatever, think again. The only people Museveni and his clique care about are himself, his kin, and even then, if you dare to cross him, he will not think twice about getting rid of you. We have a myriad of examples around Uganda where people have been let go and thrown under the bus by Museveni, because he literally has one objective, which is to stay in power for as long as possible. And he's used and he's trained his son, or his son has trained battalions of special forces to ensure that is what happens. So the idea, all this to say that the idea of peaceful transition in Uganda is becoming a pipe dream. Ugandans, and especially the opposition members, have to go back to the drawing board. We need a new strategy. We need a strategy to get rid of Museveni that will not necessarily go by the ballot box, because the ballot box has proven over and over again in, BCJ, FDC, it has proven to be a futility. He will not go via the ballot box. Therefore, all options are on the table. It is our constitutional right as Ugandans, as the people of Uganda, if we do not agree with the abuses, with the regime, to change and to do whatever we need to do with, by whatever means necessary to ensure that our country gets back on track. So in conclusion, what I really hope that you take away from this is that do not be discouraged by what happened in Hoima. It was expected, but it's almost like it should act as a catalyst and should remind you of the need to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new strategy. Ugandans cannot rely on outsiders to do this for them. Western powers are propping up Museveni. They are the reason this man has stayed in power for so long. They use the UK taxpayer, the American taxpayer, through their governments, continue to subsidize Museveni because of his continued presence in the Horn of Africa. And because of that, these the EU, the UK, the USA will not come to the rescue of Ugandans. The only people who can rescue Ugandans and bring about the meaningful change that we need are Ugandans ourselves, nobody else. We are the only people who can save ourselves. We cannot rely on the ballot box, the rule of law, institutions, the judiciary. We cannot rely on foreign powers. We have to do it ourselves. And that includes me, you, those on the ground in Uganda, the people in the diaspora. Everybody literally needs to roll their sleeves up, get their hands dirty, and start thinking of ways we can literally unseat this man by any means possible. Beyond that, we're looking at another 10, 20 years of this man. Because, like I said, he's very good at what he does, which is hoodwink the West, which is propping him up to ensure, hoodwink them into saying if there's any change in regime, then the Horn of Africa will not be stable, which is complete nonsense. It's a complete nonsense, but he uses that. It's a carrot and stick thing that he uses with Western powers. But Western powers at some point need to realize that the people of Uganda are suffering. And at some point, they will be on the wrong side of history if they continue to support this dictatorship. So Ugandans, don't be discouraged. Let's fight harder and let's come up with a new strategy of galvanizing the people and ensuring that there is regime change and we get rid of this dictator. It's 33 years and there's nothing new he can promise us. Nothing. It's the same old nonsense. It's time for change, but all options are on the table. Thank you.